All right, welcome everyone. We're excited to be here to talk to you all about building a language server for Eclipse MicroProfile today as part of EclipseCon. So let us introduce ourselves first. I'm YK.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Catherine.
Yeah, we are all from IBM, and we work on Open Liberty project, which is an open source project on for a framework or runtime that allows you to build cloud native or enterprise Java applications. And also we contribute to various microprofile tooling projects, like for instance, the microprofile language server that we'll be talking about to you all today. All right, so first off, let's take a quick look at what is Eclipse MicroProfile. As Eclipse MicroProfile is actually an open collaborative effort, right? A community efforts on looking at what sort of APIs we need to optimize microservices, allow you to build microservices or cloud native Java applications easily using Java as the language programming language, right? So it's done by various folks, individuals, including individuals in the community that are interested in Java microservices or building that, and obviously includes various vendors like IBM, Red Hat, and others, Tommy Tribe, and others, Para in the community, right? So there, it provides a different set of APIs for you to build REST services that include certain APIs that are the same or common between Jakarta EE and MicroProfile, to additional APIs that allows you to manage or work with many different services, as well as to operate in a cloud native environment for observability, right? So for additional information, you can go to the links here or just visit microprofile.io to find out more. Right, so with that in mind, with our MicroProfile as the set of APIs to allow us to build cloud native Java microservices, now what is the language server? Why do we need a language server for MicroProfile? Obviously, MicroProfile is the APIs that developers will work with, and developers will work with editors or IDEs that hopefully will make it easier for them to code using MicroProfile APIs, right? So that's where language server comes in. A language server is a common way for us to build language capabilities such as code completion, validation, diagnostics, or hardware help, and so on, in a common way through using the language server protocol, which was defined initially by Microsoft, right? So the language server protocol allows us to a standard way for the editors and the language servers to communicate. So then through a common language server, we can provide a common set of language capabilities to all different kinds of editors. And that's the benefits of having a language server. So prior, without the language server protocol or an implementation of a language server, each editor would have to do its own implementation. Eclipse, one for something else, and then another time for server. Then you only need to build a common language server, and then exposing that language server to the different editors that you want to support in via a client. Then you don't have to redo your work. And then at the same time, you can choose to do your language server in any language that you like. Now that brings us to Eclipse MicroProfile language server. So the LSP4MP is this project, incubator project, that we have started under the Eclipse Foundation, right? It originated in different efforts by IBM and Red Hat to do a language server for Eclipse MicroProfile. So we come together, collaborate, and we put forth with the community a proposal to Eclipse Foundation for a common project here. And that leads to the birth or the inception of Eclipse LSP4MP. So the idea here is that through a common language server using the language server protocol, that we'll be able to provide programming support to developers that would like to work with MicroProfile to code their Java microservices, right? So as you make changes to your code, we'll provide validations when you work with MicroProfile annotations or APIs, and we'll provide you assistance to do quick fixes or code completion and things like that. So that's Eclipse LSP4MP. And this is a view of the folks involved in the project and the community around the project, right? There's various folks here. We don't have space to show all the pictures, but in the spirit of Eclipse Foundation, it's an open collaborative effort. So we invite all of you to participate and join us. So now let's just take a look at the technical aspects, and Ryan will be diving into the architecture of the language server that we're talking about here, and as well as other details. Please take it away.
So yeah, I'm going to be talking about the architecture. So LSP4MP is composed of two main components. There's the MicroProfile language server itself, which provides MicroProfile language features to your editor using the language server protocol. And then there's also a MicroProfile JDT-LS extension, which extends the Eclipse JDT-LS or the Java language server, and it provides project information to the MicroProfile language server. So this includes stuff like Java class path changes, AST information, and more. So because the MicroProfile language server and the JDT-LS cannot communicate with each other directly, they communicate to each other through the IDE itself using JSON RPC. So why does the LSP4MP project have two different components? The reason for that is that Java already has excellent language support with the Eclipse JDT and the JDT-LS. So when we're providing our own MicroProfile support, we do not want to duplicate the work that's already being done by the JDT, so computing the class path, building the AST. So the solution for this was to reuse what we can from the JDT through the MicroProfile JDT-LS extension. So for diagnostics for Java files, diagnostics are controlled by the server, meaning that it will receive notifications that the document has changed or that a document was opened through notifications like text document did open or text document did change. And then when appropriate, the MicroProfile language server will try to compute the diagnostics. So to do this, it delegates the request to the MicroProfile JDT-LS extension using a custom LSP notification called MicroProfile Java Diagnostics. This is forwarded to the JDT-LS extension through the IDE, and then the JDT-LS can use JDT information to compute all available diagnostics and send it back to the MicroProfile language server. Once the MicroProfile language server has the diagnostics, it will publish them to the IDE by sending a text document publish diagnostics notification. So while diagnostics are published from the server to the client, other language features are requested by the client to the server. So for example, if you hover over something in your IDE, the client will request hover information by sending a text document hover request to the MicroProfile language server. Again, the MicroProfile language server will delegate the request to the JDT using a custom MicroProfile Java hover LSP message. So this goes through the IDE to the JDT-LS. The JDT-LS MicroProfile extension will use JDT information to compute any possible data it should display in a hover, and then send that back to the MicroProfile language server, which will then respond to the original text document hover request with the hover information to display. Now for properties files, the MicroProfile language server maintains a cache of properties and property metadata. So when a language feature such as completion is triggered, or for a property file, it sends a text document completion or a text document hover request to the MicroProfile language server. The MicroProfile language server will check its cache for completion options. If the completion options do not exist, it needs to get that list of property metadata and project information from the JDT-LS. So it sends a custom MicroProfile project info LSP command to the editor, and then that's forwarded to the JDT-LS. The JDT-LS and the MicroProfile JDT-LS extension use the JDT again to compute project information, so the available config properties, and then it sends that back to the MicroProfile language server. The MicroProfile language server can then add that information to its cache, and then finally is able to respond to the text document completion response with the available config properties. Now for subsequent requests, say for a hover or for a completion, the next time the request is sent to the MicroProfile language server, if the completion options already exist in the cache, we can send back the completion request immediately. So you can see here, this is kind of the metadata that we store for properties. So we include information like the name, description, if it's required, default values, and all of this is used to power language features like hover, completion, diagnostics. So the MicroProfile language server uses this cached properties information to power all of those language features. So an IDE or editor client surfaces the language support capabilities provided by a language server to the users of the IDE or editor. Currently, we have available a tools for MicroProfile VS Code extension that provides support for the development of MicroProfile-based applications using Eclipse LSP4MP. And you can see more about it at the GitHub link. And then so Eclipse LSP4MP handles support for both Java files and properties files. And this can be extended using LSP4MP extensions to add additional functionality through Java SPI. So for example, Quarkus provides additional Java code snippets, as well as properties support for Quarkus-specific config properties. And Catherine is going to walk you through a demo of the MicroProfile language server and VS Code MicroProfile.
Thanks, Ryan. So here I am in VS Code, and today I'm just going to show you how using the tools for MicroProfile VS Code extension makes it even easier to develop your MicroProfile applications. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have this tools for MicroProfile extension installed. And you can do that via the extensions marketplace in your VS Code IDE. For the sake of time, I already have a project generated here. I generated this using the MicroProfile starter, so I recommend you check that out if you want to generate a template MicroProfile application. So for this demo, I have two MicroProfile REST services that communicate to each other. And let's say that eventually it will be deployed on something like Kubernetes. So we also want to configure some externalized config and MicroProfile health reporting. So let's take a look at these MicroProfile REST services. We have service B and service A. Now service B consists of just a simple service controller, and this you pass in a parameter and it will return that parameter to you. Now in service A, we're using MicroProfile REST client to consume the service from service B. So here's where we see our first MicroProfile language server feature, which are these hovers for your URLs. And you can see here, this URL is actually coming from service B to tell us which API we are consuming. So if I click on this URL, you can see I can actually access that endpoint through service B. If we take a look at the client controller class, this is where we're injecting our REST client and using it on the client side. Now, let's say we want to make some changes to this Java code. One of the things that the MicroProfile language server offers is diagnostics for your Java code. So here I've removed the inject annotation, and instantly you see this diagnostic telling us that if we're going to use MicroProfile REST client, we have to also use the inject annotation. So we can inject it as a CDI bean. And you can click through the quick fix to insert the annotation, and you can see our warning has disappeared. Similarly, as Ryan touched on before, we offer code completion. So as you start typing, you'll notice you have code completion for specific MicroProfile config annotations or Java code. In this case, I'm creating a new configuration property using MicroProfile config. So I'm going to create an injected int. So this will just be an integer. And if I hover over the name here, we can see it says injected int is not set. And that means that we haven't yet defined this value in our MicroProfile config properties file. So if we go over to our MicroProfile config properties file, we also have language server features available for your properties file. You can see as I start typing, it will start code completing properties that I have in my Java code that I haven't yet implemented. Similarly, if I type in the wrong type, so here I've entered a Boolean, but we have a type mismatch int expected, you'll get diagnostics available in your properties file as well. And that's telling us that the corresponding Java code is expecting an integer. If I replace that with an integer, you can see our diagnostic warning has gone away. And if I go back to my client controller and hover over the injected int, we can actually see the value we've set in our properties file. Now let's say we want to create a MicroProfile health class. So MicroProfile health tells us when our application is up and running. If I access the -health endpoint right now, you can see we don't have any MicroProfile health checks. So I'm going to create one from scratch, and I'll just call it health readiness check. Now here I can use the MicroProfile language server snippets to create a health readiness check. So if I start typing MP readiness and select enter, we have a full snippet here of a fully functioning implemented health readiness class. All I have to do is resolve my package name. And if I save that and check out my health endpoint, you can see our health readiness check is there and it says it's up and running. And now we can change this template code as needed. Additionally, say I'm making some additional Java code changes and I remove the implements health check. You see another diagnostic warning here that says we're going to be using the @liveness or @readiness annotation. We have to implement the health check interface. And again, we can quick fix to fix that. So you can see the MicroProfile language server is providing you with knowledge of the MicroProfile APIs as you code to make it more efficient to create your microservices. So that concludes the demo for today. What have we learned from creating the LSP4MP project? So we've learned, as Ryan has touched on before, that we want to reuse what is available through the JDT LS extension point to do things like compute the class path or make use of the abstract syntax tree. We've also learned that there's lots of flexibility and opportunities for the community to participate and innovate. We have one common language server that can be exposed by different clients for different editors or IDEs, like you just saw the VS Code extension that we currently offer, and that the LSP4MP itself can be extended to provide additional capabilities. So where are we right now? Well, we've released the first release of Eclipse LSP4MP and correspondingly the first release of tools for MicroProfile, the VS Code extension. This chart shows all of the MicroProfile APIs and the current language feature support that we offer. So in that demo, you saw we had diagnostics for MicroProfile health, some code snippets, of course, some properties completion, properties diagnostic for MicroProfile config. You can see that was just the surface of what we offer. There's a lot more language feature support available. What's next for us is to have complete support for all of the MicroProfile APIs, so expanding that chart you just saw, and currency and support for the next major MicroProfile release. We also want more community collaboration to create more clients, not just VS Code, and create clients for the Eclipse IDE and the IntelliJ IDEA IDE. So we'd like you to get involved. As we said, this is an open source project. You can try out the language server by installing tools for MicroProfile from the VS Code Marketplace or contributing directly to the project on GitHub at LSP4MP. You can create an issue to request new features or submit your own PR. Thanks for listening. Feel free to reach out to us in the question and answer section or reach out directly to each of us on Twitter.
So thank you everyone for joining. So we're glad to be able to share what we have done there with MicroProfile and the language server for MicroProfile with you all. We look forward to your feedback and even your participation. And I'm YK, and here with me is Catherine. We'll take a look at any questions that we have, and we'll try to address them. Let's see. I think there is a question around. There is a question around if the way that we are the way we are using the reusing the JDT language server and through the client, I guess we are following the request through the client. Does that even bind it to a specific client? No, it shouldn't be, as long as the client supports the language server protocol, right? So then if the client supports the language server protocol, then we would be working with the client through how they support that protocol, right? So the idea is certainly not to have tight coupling. Now, the one question, if we would be extending it to other clients beyond the typical ones like Eclipse or IntelliJ or VS Code, the question would be around what kind of Java, core Java support that they have, and then how we work with that or reuse that if possible, right? Otherwise, then we'll have to look at the handling of that. So, Catherine, do you have any other thoughts on that question?
No, I think you summed it up pretty much. There's also some architecture diagrams on the LSP4MP project itself that show how the Java processing would work, or rather how we would connect to the JDT-LS on multiple different IDEs. So you can see there if you're looking for a specific IDE. I believe we have diagrams for VS Code, IntelliJ, and then generic IDE implementation.
Right, and I'll add that so we built on top, or we extend, or we plug into the JDT-LS for core Java handling, and so we can reuse those capabilities. But really, from a client's perspective, the client talks to the language servers through the LSP protocol. So it's generic in that sense. It's not as if we are sort of built into the client. So what shortcomings did you encounter in the LSP model when building LSP4MP? I'll let Catherine chime in later, but from my perspective, I thought it's pretty good. I'm not sure if there's anything in particular that comes to mind at this moment. Catherine, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. It's a pretty complete protocol. I don't think there were any specific capabilities we needed that didn't already exist in the protocol.
Right, so there's a question around IntelliJ. So and the support for LSP4MP for IntelliJ. So that's what we are looking into and working with the community on, right? So we know, for instance, the Red Hat team has done some work in this space. There is some LSP support for the tooling that they have done for what they, I guess, for Quarkus, if I'm not mistaken. So we're looking to see how we can reuse that, or that can become a common base that can be shared, and then through that we can provide the MicroProfile, I guess, extension on top, right? So and expose the LSP4MP in turn. So. Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that comes along. So if there's interest, and if you have experience in this space and can help us out, we'd love to have you participate and join us in our efforts here, right? So don't hesitate to just go on to, we have a channel on Gitter, so just maps to the LSP4MP project on GitHub. So don't hesitate to just pipe in there and then share thoughts, and then we'll see how we can work together to make things even better for MicroProfile users and developers, right? So. Catherine, do you have any other thoughts on that question around IntelliJ that you want to share with the folks here?
Not at the moment. It does not support LSP natively, but yeah, we're hoping to work with some of our colleagues at Red Hat to get an IntelliJ client built for MicroProfile.
Yeah, as you can see, Catherine earlier showed the summary list of what we have supported, or the support that we have for the different MicroProfile APIs, whether it's with the different config properties that the different APIs support, to the different kinds of language assistance capabilities. While it appears to be a relatively complete list, but there are still gaps that we need to close. So yeah, we for one, try out the clients out there for VS Code and let us know if you have any feedback. Just open up issues in the GitHub repo, and then there's already issues out there for things that we still need to do. So if you love to help, we love to have your participation. So just let us know. And at the same time, we certainly are looking to build out, for instance, the question around IntelliJ came up, right? We're looking to see how we can have a client for IntelliJ as well as for Eclipse, and then we can look at and then obviously it's free for the community. It's open up for the community to innovate and do what is best for MicroProfile, right? And our users there. And yeah, we are actively looking at from a project standpoint what it means to do something for IntelliJ and Eclipse and to work with the community on that. Yeah, so join us and let us know if you have any feedback there. So, all right, I think it's been great for us to be able to hop on here and share what we are doing with all of you, and to be able to interact with you all and chat. So as mentioned, don't hesitate to reach out further after this session. Just hop on Gitter if you prefer to chat. Otherwise, you can tap us directly on Twitter, or just open up issues for us in GitHub, right? So any other thoughts, Catherine, before we end the session here?
No, I think you covered it all.
All right. So it's been great to be able to join EclipseCon here this year. Well, thank you all. We'll chat again hopefully soon.